You asked me, what was your question? How does the word affect me? It depends. It depends on the source. She asked me, how does the word nigger in particular affect me? One, it depends on the source. I find it interesting, you know, just in terms of etymology and putting things in a historical context and realizing that history does not begin with slavery, you know. For instance, the Niger River in West Africa existed as the Niger River before Europeans arrived. And in the Niger River Basin, there are over 200 languages spoken. Within those languages, you'll find many words meaning anything from wind to river to God that sound a lot like the word nigger. So that when I think of, you know, well, what is it? What is it that makes these people of this experience keep clinging to this word? I don't say, oh, it's just self-hate. I go, oh, maybe it's deeper than that. Maybe it's a word like okay. You know, like we don't know where it came from. Supposedly it came from, anybody know? Huh? Native Americans. Supposedly it's a term that was used by Native Americans. Like there are several words that we don't know the history of that we perpetuate, you know? Just like there are several images and ideas, but all throughout language you'll find words that are older than the collective understanding of them. Sometimes I question whether nigger is one of those words. If I look at it simply within the context of our history, then I go, oh, then maybe it must be part of the healing process. It's almost like, you know, if you're filled with a bunch of venom, say you were bit by a snake, you know, the old way of approaching that would be like you're supposed to, you know, suck out the venom. So that when I hear kids spit in that term repeatedly, I'm going, ah, maybe they're just getting that venom out generationally. I have no idea. It depends. But of course, when I use it in the context of writing and performing, every word I choose, just like when I speak of the term motherfucker, every word I choose is there for a very specific reason. And it's there for more than shock value, you know? Obviously, I wouldn't be a fan of censorship as a writer, as an artist. But I think that, you know, that we can find answers and discover the power of language and words and life by doing things better than sweeping, you know, words under a rug and acting like they never existed. You know, I find it interesting to monitor the effect. That's why I named my album Niggy Tardas, because I wanted to prove the schizophrenia of our society, and that, you know, people would think, what a brilliant name, am I allowed to say it? You know, like all the 9 Inch Nail fans, like, oh my God, I love that album. Have you heard the album Stardust? Depending on what circle they're in, like, you gotta hear this album. Is it all right for me to turn them on to this album? You know, like, I love that, because at the end of the day, I don't believe in race. Race is a social concept, but there's nothing scientific to prove it, you know? I mean, at the end of the day, we are one. And it's that simple. When I think in terms of humanity as a species. And I also think in terms of other species. I'm a vegetarian. So, playing with those terms, though, and watching and monitoring, you know, the effect that it has on an audience, on people. Of course, not being able to fully monitor it because I'm releasing books and albums, and so I'm not there in your room with you as you know, as it affects you. But of course, you hear it from more sources than you do from me. But when I use it, it certainly is contextualized within the sort of impact that I aim to have with my work, which is primarily to encourage and inspire anyone to begin the process of thinking for themselves, to begin the process of deciphering our reality and blossoming within, you know, this lifetime. So. Okay, yes.
What was it like working with the current resident?
Pretty cool. I mean, it was like working with a nerd, you know, like, you know, his drug binge days were behind him when I worked with him, you know, so It wasn't really rock and roll, you know. It was more like, hey, do you mind starting at 10 o'clock in the morning? Like, you want to go in the studio at 10 a.m.? Like, yeah. All right. You know, so we'd work from like 10 to 6, you know, like 9 to 5 hours. Just like Diet Coke. So, you know, but on the other hand, it was, I'd gone into, well, I did my first album with Rick Rubin. And with Rick Rubin, the experience that I had was he gave me the Beatles' White Album. And he said, Saul, you're a great writer. This is songwriting. Learn the difference. When you have 20 songs, we'll go into the studio. And then he sent a bunch of equipment to my house, which I then had to figure out, and I'd never even written a song before, so it was like, okay. And then I'd compile songs and then call Rick and be like, okay, I have some songs to play you. And I'd play him songs, and like maybe 8 songs, and he'd be like, that's not a song, that's just a long chorus. That one might be a song. That one's not a song. You know, like, and so it was very, I began second guessing and all this stuff. With Trent, of course, I worked with him on my 3rd album, not my 1st. So I was a bit more seasoned, a bit less naive, maybe a bit less arrogant than I had been when I was working with Rick and coming out of this movement in Brooklyn. Like, no, we know what we must, you know, project into the world. I was feeling like Joan of Arc when I was with Rick. But with Trent, I remember the first thing I played him, he wanted to know, we were touring together for my 2nd album. And the second show, he was like, I'd love to work with you if you ever want to do a song, an album, whatever you want. I want to do it. And I thought that could be cool. So one day on the tour bus, he's like, so do you have demos for your new album? And I had a few songs, and so the first song I played him was Scared Money. And I remember him being like, that's fucking awesome. He's like, that's the most, I remember he said it was confident. He felt it was really confident, maybe because the music played for a while before I felt the need to speak or sing. So he was just like, it's a really confident, you know, song. I love it. I'm down. And every single thing I brought to the table, he would just be ecstatic about. And so, of course, that made me super excited to bring him stuff because I knew that he'd be like, what the fuck? And he had this thing going on where he'd just be like, he was beginning to work on, he was about to start working on Year Zero, but I think he was a little stuck. And so he was starting to feel inspired based on what we were sharing. And so then I started helping him with Year Zero and all this stuff, and it was just, it was an amazing, you know, camaraderie. It was like, you know, every time that I have worked with a producer, it's felt like a mentoring program, you know, where I'm the little one going, what do you think? And it was awesome. It was great. He was very, also because I'm really insecure about making music. You know, I often feel like, do I have any right to make music? You know, you know, because of stupid shit, like because I went to school for acting. So I'm like, but I never studied it. Do I have any right? You know, and he's like, what? Do you hear this shit that you're doing? I'm like, yeah. Does anybody else hear it? You know, just. So he really inspired me and helped boost my confidence. That was the main thing about working with Trent.